What is up, YouTube? Carter here. Got another video for you. We're going to be talking about Chinese, sorry about that noise, Chinese OEM model knife making extravaganza. Can it continue? I don't know. Here's my thoughts. This is springboarding off of my J-Cape video. Oftentimes I'm shooting a review or something, and then I have an idea of something I want to talk about, and I don't want to ram horn it into my main video, so I quickly do a follow-up. And I'm going to grab some accoutrement. Look at this Opinel right here, this little guy. I've had this thing forever. Wow, look, it's dirty. Oof, I need to clean that up. Blued up the blade, I contoured the handles here, I stained it. This was fun. These are fun to mess with, these little Opinels, and just kind of cool to have around. Anyways, what else do I got here? Anything fun? No, garbage. I've got a Direware business card, don't need that. Got some Emerson's, got some got some lube. Got some lube, baby. Let's put that in here. Let's get the lube in here. So, what got me thinking, because I think about these things, U.S. made versus overseas made, but in particular, I'm talking about the newer-ish kind of trend of U.S. companies and designers kind of using an overseas manufacturer to make their knives. So, example of that is this this J-Cape here by Something Obscene Company. So Felix is the designer and he's the force behind Something Obscene. I don't think he's designed all the knives. He's used some other people to help. I'm not sure which models. All of them. I know the Lek. I don't think he designed J-Cape, which is dedicated to a friend of his, but I don't know who the designer was. But anyways, so what it is U.S. company, U.S. designers, they get pre-orders, they put in a big order with overseas manufacturers, they get the knife produced, with the goal being that you get features on a cool new design that you wouldn't be able to get for the price point, right? That's the basic goal, right? You leverage good quality overseas OEMs to make the knife, and then you get a really nice knife that wouldn't really otherwise be possible, right? So the concept is that Felix wouldn't be able to really successfully make this knife. Now, I don't think that's completely true. I think he definitely could make this knife, but the problem is it would take a really long time for him to kind of get the manufacturing prowess, get the machinery, which is how it was done back in the day. You know, knife manufacturers would like start in their garage and they would make stuff that was pretty garbage, but they'd slowly build up. They'd get reputation. They'd get more customers. They'd get more sales. You invested into the shop. It's a whole long process. The problem now is because everybody else is moving so fast at speed, anybody that would try to do that would just sink, right? You'd never be able to. If Felix did like a crude USA-made version of this, it would just never sell because people want perfection out the gate. You know, they want all the features and they want all all the niceness and the perfect machining. They expect something machined this perfectly just at product launch now. And so there's really no way with the way things are set up now for somebody to do what Hinder did or Emerson or Strider or CRK. It just wouldn't happen, or it'd be very unlikely to happen. The only time you kind of see that is when you have somebody that their trade is manufacturing and machining, and they have access to those machines. Maybe they have a normie business, right? They manufacture machine parts for engines or whatever, and then they leverage that knowledge and ability to move into knives. That's about the only time you can really see that happen because they already have access to that equipment, or at least most of that equipment. They have access to that knowledge, and they aren't knife makers first, they're machinists first. If you're just a guy who likes knives and wants to make a knife and figure out how to make them, I mean, with the way things are right now, it's not going to happen. You just can't do it. So what's been going on is people that are knife designers or knife enthusiasts first, they reach out to the OEMs and they get them made. Now, in the past, that has worked pretty well. You know, you're able to kind of get your designs made and ooh, I got a ring. I got a ring on that one. Get your designs made and Do it relatively cheaply, and then you can get these really high quality, feature rich knives of your design, and it's worked out good. But the trend I'm seeing and the concern I have is as these OEMs become more normalized, more popular, and kind of stand up on their own, I see the order sizes, the price, and the wait times all going up. It is getting to the point where it might not be sustainable. Because it seems like these makers now have to put in orders that are so huge, hundreds of knives, and they all have to be kind of predefined, right? You have to say it's this knife design, and then there's these 4 variations, and we're doing this number of each, and then they put up a pre-order, and then it takes 9 months until these things come to fruition. And oh man, that's a tough model to hold on to, especially for a hobby, right? Unnecessary, quote unquote, unnecessary items. People aren't patient and they switch around. People that place orders, let's say they get in line, they place an order for the V4 J Cape, 9-month wait. 3 months later, they get into guns, they get out of knives, or maybe they discover Striders, they get into those, or maybe they lose their job, they no longer have money, whatever. Like, things change. It's hard to work on that kind of timeline, and that is one of the issues with this sort of model compared to like Emerson. So yes, Emerson, you're not getting all these features, right? It's lower, cheap. Well, I hate to say lower quality steel, but it's less advanced steel, it's cheaper steel, it's cheaper materials or less expensive materials. You don't get all the doodads, there's no bearings, although you can get Emersons with bearings, so scratch that. You know what I'm trying to say. It's not, the feature-rich, full titanium slabs for less money. This equivalent in an Emerson would be quite a lot more. However, that gap is starting to shrink. Because it used to be the thing with these overseas made knives was they were dirt cheap. You could get full titanium knives for like $200, $300, but the price has slowly been creeping up. Like the cost on these, I believe, was $499, and it's like, whoa, for a Chinese made knife. Now it's a really good OEM, beautiful, amazing design, all the features, but the price point's getting up there. A $500 Emerson is a pretty nice beast. Like this one here with these Richlite handles and stainless steel hardware, and the quality of Emersons have gone up, way smoother, way nicer. This was like from Emerson, I think $300 with all these upgrades. And so if you were to tack on another $200 worth in theory, you'd get a pretty nice knife, USA made. So the gap in pricing is starting to shrink, which is a problem. But the other thing, the biggest issue is being able to pivot. Emerson can come up with a new knife design, or especially a play on an existing one, right? Like, so if he said, okay, this is the Overland Renegade. If he said, you know what, we're going to do a special run with fat carbon fiber scales and S35 VN steel, whatever, throw bearings in it. Some sort of special edition. Like, he can go from concept to delivery quickly because he's in a shop. He can make it happen. You would just do, and a lot of this is how badly you want to make it happen, but you do a prototype, a few prototypes, check it out. Once you have a design, you do the tooling and the machining, and you start making it. This one, it's probably about a year between when you start saying, what would I like to see in this next run? Working with the OEM, coming up with a deal, coming up with a price point, and then waiting for the manufacturing. It's a year until you see that knife. It's a long time. It takes a long time. Whereas USA made knives, where you're in control of the manufacturing and you're in control of priorities too, because you got to remember, this OEM, they have their own agenda. They have their own other orders. They have their own plays. They have their own business model. Your knife isn't their top priority, and because it's not your company. With Emerson or whatever US made company, if you want it to be a top priority, it's a top priority. It's completely your call. You can shut down all production and say, no, we're doing the super edition of this Overland Renegade. Like, that's our top priority. It's completely in your control. And because most of your customer base is in the US and your manufacturing is in the US, way quicker, way quicker. And that's how a lot of US companies were able to innovate like back in the 2000s, because the turnaround between concept and production is so short. And in the early days of China manufacturing, it was pretty short too, because these Chinese OEMs were trying to make a name for themselves. They were trying to prove themselves. They didn't have a huge backlog of people trying to place orders of thousands and thousands of knives. And so you would be able to kind of do more with them than you can now. So the worry is that it's going to continue to get worse. The worry is that the price point will continue to shrink. But more importantly, the timeline for smaller knife producers is going to just grow and grow to the point where it's not sustainable. People doing a pre-order and they don't see the knife for 2 years. It's just, it just won't really work. So then the only option there is for the knife maker to front the cost and basically say, these knives, I'm not even going to consider them as being sold until they get here, because people are only willing to pre-order so much. Like you've got to at least feel like you'll get that thing at some freaking point. But that creates a whole nother issue. But then it doesn't solve the timeline issue of design, right? Because once you stretch that timeline out so far, now you run the risk of the market changing. You do a bunch of knives like this. By the time these things get made and shipped, flippers are out. Nobody likes flippers. Nobody likes bearings. It's this other stuff that's popular. You're behind the game. Now you've got millions of dollars worth of knives you're trying to sell that nobody wants. So anyways, my point is, I'm curious to see how things go. This was a little bit of a golden goose and kind of allowed some fresh air to be breathed into the industry, because it allowed makers and designers access to make high quality knives quickly and get their vision out without being stuffed because of logistical things. Like think of how many cool knife makers popped up in the mid 2000s that had really innovative ideas, really good designs, and the logistics of making a quality knife destroyed them, right? They weren't ever able to really get out the door. Either they weren't able to make a knife or they weren't able to continue doing it. I think there's probably a lot. And now, or at least recently, that hasn't been an issue. Somebody that has the gumption and a good quality design, good marketing, they could make something like this happen when they otherwise maybe wouldn't be able to. So I hope it continues. I hope enough. Well, I don't know. I'm torn on the whole overseas knife making. I go back and forth. It's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like I said, I would love if something obscene was able to make this knife in the US. I just don't think it would be possible. And I know some people's stance is, well, then it shouldn't be made. If you can't make it happen, it shouldn't be made. It's not that simple. You have to play the game to a certain degree, and you can't compete. So unless the only way that would happen is if we completely just unanimously shut off overseas OEMs for knives and just said, yeah, it's just nobody's going to do it. That way everybody's on the same playing field. But until that happens, anybody that tries to just start manufacturing knives are just going to get crushed, because other people are still using overseas resources. And at the end of the day, people want the nicest knife for the least amount of money as quickly as possible. And that's never really going to change. The only thing that changes is as possible. That's what changes. Back in the day, I've already said this. You guys can tune out right now if you want. I'm kind of talking about the same stuff. But back in the day with Strider, like it took years. Like Strider took years from their first fixed blades to going to shows to making a name for themselves. Nobody even knew who they were. I remember, here's a funny story. I've been wanting to tell this for a while. Well, not really funny. I'll tell it later. But nobody knew who they were, and it took years and years of making knives. Hinder, if you look at Hinder's first knives, no offense, they're garbage. I mean, not garbage, but they're not great. It took years of toiling and selling a few knives and doing this and doing that, but it worked because that's what everybody was doing. That's all there was, and it was all new and it was all fresh. They weren't competing against people that could send CAD drawings to China and get a knife in 6 months that blew that one out of the water. Like, that wasn't on the table, and so it worked. Now the playing field, the game, it's changed, and to a certain degree, you have to play the game. It's difficult to break out of it, unless What I'm hoping is that this shift in Chinese OEMs, where the price point and the timelines are not being very conducive for this stuff, that it does kind of push people into U.S. manufacturing. It would be cool, like if, companies like Medford, if they kind of loosened up a little bit on what they did and their requirements and would actually be more of a true OEM. They kind of are, but they always want to put their little flavor on it, and they're limited on the stuff they'll do. But if Medford kind of expanded and said, you know what, we're just going to be the best knife OEM in the U.S. out there, that would be really cool. I could see that happening, and I would like that. The Strider .75 AR is a pretty sweet knife. If you threw a lock bar insert in there, I mean, it would essentially be almost indistinguishable from this. I guess you'd have to put bearings in it, but I don't know. I don't love the bearing thing. I think you can get enough smoothness without bearings. But anyways, getting off topic. So that's what I'm hoping happens. Oz Machine Company, Medford, they kind of become U.S. OEMs first. And they are the avenue for getting some of these knives made. That way we have USA-made knives. And when you look at the price point, like a Strider .75 AR is only a little bit more in cost than this one. So I think it's doable. And like all manufacturing, the more volume is pushed through, the better the pricing. That's why Striders are so damn expensive. It's just such limited pricing, anyways. All right, guys, I've talked too long. I'll talk to you later. Carter is out. Ramble City, we're done.